Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue to the next summit session, I would like to take a moment to express our gratitude to our sponsors. Many thanks to our premium partner, Imperial Tobacco, our gold sponsors, Triglav, Turkish Airlines, Visa, and Tikvesh, and all of our other sponsors and partners. Their generous support has made this event possible, and we could not have done it without them. I would also like to take a moment to acknowledge Bete Ilin, the composer of our summit music. They say that the Macedonian heart beats in 7/8. The beat you've been hearing throughout the summit is a traditional Macedonian rhythm, and Bete has done a fantastic job of infusing it into the music. Please join me in giving Bete a round of applause. It's now time to resume our summit with our next session. It's titled Strategy versus Execution, an Oxymoron or a Success Formula. And it promises to be an informative and engaging discussion. Please join me in welcoming the panelists and the moderator for this session. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us for this, what I am sure will be a very exciting session, talking about strategy and execution, I would say, instead of versus, hearing from distinguished leaders from very different backgrounds. Before I give an intro of the session, I would like to ask you to fill out a quick one-question survey that defines whether it should be strategy versus or and. It will be in the app called, starting with the letter C. So before I introduce the speakers, I want to introduce the topic. So strategy or execution versus execution, if you ask venture capitalists to explain strategy versus execution in the startup world, they'll give you the formula 100-1000. Idea is 1, plan or strategy is 100, and execution is 1000. If you look at government examples, there is a famous book, How to Run a Government, by Michael Barber. He says something similar. Actually, the formula is the same. It's 10% strategy and 90% execution. If you ask any strategy consultant, I think they will say strategy matters a bit more if you want to go from a good to great company. As a former strategy consultant, I would agree with that. So the question is to see what you think before we introduce the speakers. Whenever the results are ready, please show the results. Now I will introduce the three panelists. I'll start with a dear friend who comes, who's a guest from furthest away from here, Keti. Keti is, well, you'll see her 20 years of experience in the program, but in a nutshell, Keti is a technocrat driven by impact. She has been for most of her career in government, and first as the head of the FDI agency, then deputy minister for economy in Georgia, a country that I find it to be a remarkable success story, and in many ways should be an inspiration for Macedonia. I think all of us know Georgia, but maybe very few will actually know what has happened in Georgia since. So in the past 20 years, Macedonia has doubled its GDP. Georgia quadrupled it. In the past 20 years, Macedonia doubled its investments. Georgia increased them 8-fold. And in the past 20 years, Macedonia doubled its tourist visitors. Georgia increased it 10-fold. So it's really remarkable to have Keti here to talk about what were some of the policies that were behind that. Keti is now in business, advising governments and companies, and she's also a member of how do you say, I guess, part of the Young Global Leaders Forum, Young Global Leaders program of the World Economic Forum. So, big welcome to Keti for being here today. Adrian is another guest of ours, coming not so far away from Albania. Adrian is an example. I just had the pleasure to meet him, but looking at his profile is interesting. He's an example of somebody who started as an engineer, PhD from Polytechnic University of Milan, then became a corporate business leader, CEO of Albania's telecom company, and I guess almost 3 decades ago became an entrepreneur and set up his own company, TCN, which today is a multi-million-dollar business operating across Southeast Europe. It's basically an integrated systems and technology company that serves clients in defense industry, in maritime, in air traffic, and other infrastructure and utility sectors. So, big welcome to Adrian, please. Finally, the person that needs the least introduction in this context, but I will make a bit of introduction for our guests from abroad, Mr. Zhivko Mukaetov, CEO of our largest pharmaceutical company and one of the largest companies in Macedonia. Its revenue is more than 1% of Macedonia's GDP. And Zhivko has taken a company with 80 years of history and made it an even bigger success story. In his time, the revenue has almost 5-fold increased, basically between 2006 when he took over and today. And maybe things that not everybody knows about Zhivko from the Macedonian community. He's passionate about educating young talent. His foundation, Traice Mukaetov, has invested almost 2 million euros in supporting Macedonians to study. And he's a proud father of 4 children. So, Zhivko, thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Do we have the results? So, execution wins, 90%, 60%. Okay, so somewhere in between. Thank you all for participating. And so strategy, basically about a quarter of the individuals talked about strategy, so being the main factor. So the first question will be exactly on this point, strategy versus execution in the, let's start with the government context. So Keti, from your decade-long experience in government, to achieve the impact that you wanted to achieve, what was a bigger challenge, strategy or execution, and why?
First of all, thank you, Borko, for this warm introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. It's fascinating to be among the people who are striving to change the country, who are in the process of transformation, and whose vision is to uplift the nation. It's really rewarding. What Borko has mentioned, and before answering this question, let me give you a little bit context. So, Georgia, it would not be a surprise, after Soviet Union collapsed, we inherited everything bad what we could have had inherited. So it was outdated infrastructure, almost no new skills that could meet the business demands, high corruption and criminal rate in the country. The industries went out of the business, so country was really suffering. But within, we had like 10 years, more than 10 years, 15 years like that, where literally countries' GDP went down below $1,000, so country was really under poverty. Back in 2004, democratically elected government came into the power, who changed the country. And within a decade, Georgia managed to become number 7 in terms of ease of doing business, least corrupted country in the region, most safe country as well in terms of criminal rate. We downsized the tax system, so it became for the business very easy to do the business in the country. And we have done a lot of other reforms that made Georgia distinguished and achieved some of the results that Borko has mentioned. We increased our tourism, so from less than half million tourists that international visitors the country had, we reached 10 million within a decade. We reached around 2 billion annual investments, which is around 8% of our GDP. We had very high, of course, unemployment rate. We decreased that, so on and so on. So to answer the question, how did it happen? It was strategy or execution. First of all, let me say, it was political will. And that's, I think, the most important, because when if you don't have a political will, you can find millions of excuses not to execute, or it doesn't matter how well this strategy is written, it's never going to happen. So what happened in Georgia was the strong political will to change and transform the country, and then of course the strategy and execution came alongside, and that's how the formula worked in the country. So the formula was that we want to change the country, and the government also had to do radical reforms, and one of the reforms was also to downsize the government itself, because it was one of the largest bureaucratic entity, and as I mentioned, most corrupted. So we changed downsized the red tape. We, mandatory was like, to make business as easy and simple to do it, and then to make Georgia big, because we are a small country like Croatia. We are under like 4 million. Our resources is limited. We don't have oil and gas, so we had to be very creative and think out of the box to be successful, and really to also think how we can generate the revenues for the country. And alongside, of course, there was like huge resistance from the existing people. So government had to bring the new people, meaning young people who was aligned in terms of the vision, who was eager to change, and people who had no experience, so-called, with corruption and with the Soviet style of managing the countries. So I always say that I was product of all these reforms, because average age in the government was around early 30s. So president himself was 36, prime minister younger, the vice ministers and ministers maybe under 30. But the dedication, willingness to change the country was so strong that we went beyond like the human capital could do at that period of time. And I always say that those momentums are not forever, so you can really have to use it and capitalize, and that was kind of the case of Georgia. So to answer shortly, and I can expand probably and talk hours on this topic, I have to say that the first and most important is the political will, and then to bring the people who align this vision and idea, and then of course the strategy and execution comes. And for us, this strategy was that we had it was not like lots of papers, which was usually end up like being on the shelves, but rather than very simple key indicators what we wanted to achieve. As an example, in terms of number of tourism, we mentioned that we want to reach 1 million, and everybody laughed. Who is going to come? Why are they going to come? Where are they going to come? And it was not just to bring the numbers. We had to align the infrastructure. We had to do the airport, roads, infrastructure, and we needed to have the hotel accommodations, and again, with very limited and very scarce budget, we were able to do. We said that we want to bring the foreign investments. How are you going to bring the foreign investments in a country which, has no reputation whatsoever? Then we said that we want to, do all these reforms in terms of ease of doing business, attracting, increasing the opportunities. And again, to kind of create a concept of the hub and to make it workable, and all the kind of policies and everything was aligned towards that. And we also did a lot of benchmark. We understood that we also did not need to create any new bicycle. All the tools and instruments are over there. So also benchmarking and studying the different countries, the similar size and similar conditions for us was an eye-opener how to change the country. And today also Prime Minister mentioned that don't seek change from outside or help outside. It should be in the hands of the local people, because you know better what you can implement into your country. Of course, the foreign help is there and it always helps, but actually the major changes should be driven by the local people and local mindsets. So thank you very much, and then I can elaborate a bit later.
Thank you, Katie. A lot of food for thought in this answer for our context, and all of it, I would say, relevant. I would move to Adrian now. Adrian, you have a business that operates across multiple sectors, across multiple geographies today. How did you get here today? Was it a top-down strategy where on day one you said you knew the markets and sectors you want to be in, or was it an emerging strategy that came as you went about? And what were the main learnings?
Thanks. Thanks for the floor. But look, to start with the division between strategy and execution, I mean, my opinion is that you cannot quantify very much, so 30% versus 70 or 60 versus 40. Both of them are very important. Both of them cannot exist without each other. So you have a strategy without execution, it's purposeless. If you have an execution doing something without a strategy, it's useless. I mean, you don't achieve anything. You don't arrive anywhere. So this is the main principle. And when we started 26 years ago, let's say, we did not have a top-down strategy. Okay. That was not something that, okay, we knew that in 26 years we'll be here. But it was a kind of evolving strategy. We started with something which was achievable at that time. I'm talking about a long time ago. I mean, and with limited resources, limited knowledge, and so forth. So we started in a way which was at that time feasible. And this allows you to grow. And once you grow and you get more, let's say, experience, you have more, a wider angle of your point of view, then you understand more things and you can adjust the strategy. So I strongly believe that it's not okay to have a fixed set strategy forever. You have to be flexible enough to develop it, to improve it, to adjust it to the circumstances. Obviously, this is not a day-to-day thing, but on certain time frames, you have to take action in order to accommodate your strategy with new conditions, which is pretty variable. So this was the main approach, let's say, starting with that company. And along the way, I mean, then we diversified in two directions, the business lines and the geography. So business line, we started as an IT company. At the time, that was the possible thing, you know. And then we, let's say, diversified IT and telecommunications. My background is in telecommunications, so that's a kind of natural thing you start with, something you know how it works. And then, okay, and keeping in mind, keeping the focus on the technology, that was the main principle. We diversified the business lines into the traffic control systems, and later on into the defense and security. So this was a good move, I would say, because it allows us to have a bigger critical mass and allows us to have a wider scope, let's say, which is important, I believe, in this part of the world, in the Western Balkans. All of us, all the countries around are small countries. So you have to have a certain diversification. Again, always talking about technology and this kind of business that we're doing. You need to have a certain diversification in order to keep...
to diversify,
Look,
to execute a diversification strategy?
it's not easy, but you have to try. But it's not impossible. It's possible. I mean, so I would encourage that to focus on. And diversification is essential in small markets, because you have to compensate it, to be complementary in various of them. But there are some principles which remain unchanged, or let's say, that we started with, and those principles remained unchanged. Strategic principles, I mean.
What were those?
Like, what kind of company we should be. So we started as a system integrator and remained a system integrator. Perhaps we added something more like infrastructure in this context, but the system integration was that. So that was the thing that we thought that we could do. And that, again, even with the business lines diversification, the system integration concept remained the same. And it is remained also the same principle connected to the technology. So we were dealing with technology. And these were the denominators of our activities. Adding a little bit of infrastructure because we want to have we do provide turnkey projects, provide everything inside, including the infrastructure and so on. So this was that. Okay.
Now, to leave it for the follow-up questions, if you may, in order to make sure that we keep the time rolling, because
Sure.
my follow-up question goes in that direction.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So we'll now move to Zhivko. So we mentioned Zhivko's leadership of Alkaloid has more than quadrupled the company's revenue. I'm certain you have much higher aspiration, whether it's fivefold, tenfold. Pliva has 600 million revenue, Krka has 1.5 billion revenue. To overtake those, let's say, regional peers, what would be a bigger challenge, strategy or execution?
Thank you, Borko, first for the nice introduction. Also, thank you, Macedonia 2025, to be back here on this stage. Next month will be 17 years since I am the CEO of the company of Alkaloid. And I must say that I learned a lot from my predecessor, Zhivko Mukaetov, who was my mentor, who was my teacher, who was my father. And I think it was very important that the team which was, let's say, running the company before us have made some basics of where the company wants to go. And I think that himself with the team were the modern architects of where Alkaloid is today. We were learning a lot through years. It was until now really a specific journey. I would like to say the company have changed from some company which was regionally oriented to nowadays I would say almost global company. We are present in about 50 countries. We have 21 offices outside of Republic of Macedonia. And from this perspective, the company have with the team which is running the vision where we want to go. I think that the main point is that, you know, culture is strategy for breakfast. If we don't build the teams, if we don't have the, let's say, the persons, the personnel, the employees who have the same vision, who are sharing the same values, it will be really difficult to have execution of any strategy which you put on a paper. So definitely I think that the people are the key. If they understand each other, if they build together these values, definitely they can go to the direction where they want to go. On the other side, it's a fact that we went through different times of crisis. And from these perspectives, I think it's very important to find a way to be resilient, to find a way to be adaptable, to find a way how, you know, you could survive in situation in which there are a lot of challenges. So definitely I think that on the first place is people. Of course, we need technology. We need research and development in our sector, which we think is very important. So we went through different types of investments during the last years. I mean, from implementing SAP system, which have changed the culture from the point of technology in the company, from investing a lot in research and development so that you know, we could be competitive globally through different phases of let's say, preparing the portfolio in the segments in which we can specialize, in which we can be, even in some segments, we are now number 2 in Europe. We want to be number 1 in that segment. So definitely it's important to have this mix, let's say, first and always the people, and after that, of course, the technology, which will, you know, go together with the people so that we could execute the strategy which we are building, you know, as a base for it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Zhivko. Now I'll go for the second round of questions before we go to a Q&A session from the audience. Given the importance of tourism for our country, wanted to see some lessons learned from Georgia's example. As I said, both countries started with 500,000 tourists 20 years ago, and Georgia has now 10 million visitors. And most of the people that I know in the UAE where I live have visited Georgia, and almost none have visited our country. Both are equally beautiful. So, Katie, tell us a bit more about the tourism strategy and the work that you did while at the Ministry of Economy to grow the tourism sector of Georgia, and what can we learn here?
Thank you. First of all, again, it will not be surprisingly to say that tourism is a very complex sector. So you really need all the ministries to be aligned to the vision. Because if Ministry of Infrastructure is not doing good roads and good infrastructure, it's hard to bring the tourists in the country. If Ministry of Justice and Foreign Affairs is not aligned and they create additional bureaucracy, visas, red tape, of course, it's very hard to bring the tourists into the country, even though you might do all the best, you know. If Internal Affairs Ministry and security, border security is not working very well, and in the country it's high criminal rate or not safe, there is no way that you can be successful. Doesn't matter how much your effort you're gonna put. So what I want to mention, the big coordination and aligning everyone on the same vision, it's the most important. And usually, especially people in the, how to say, Internal Affairs, Ministry of Justice, Foreign Affairs, they don't like, you know, talk about the tourism. For them, tourism was just probably a guy with a cap, and you know, they really only later understood the meaning of the tourism and how much effect it gives and impact it gives on the overall economy of the country. So it was a very challenging, you know, period to align everyone to the same strategy that tourism was the priority and that we should, you know, go forward. And it's a huge impact on the economy, not just a guy with a cap traveling into the country. Again, there has been a number of reforms. I will not go into details. There are fundamentals, of course, to work on the infrastructure. We worked on to develop the tourism products. Again, why they're gonna come, what they're gonna see for one day, for a few hours, for a few days. And of course, your strategy has to create the products that tourists can accommodate at least 5 days, so it's diversified. And Georgia itself gives a unique opportunity. It's an even small country. We have 22 microclimate zones, and literally from subtropical to semi-desert, you can have all the nature. It's a vibrant country with cultural heritage that you can capitalize. But of course, if you don't take care of all this infrastructure and all this cultural heritage, you know, things, and if you don't package it well, nobody is gonna come. Public safety, the most important. The tourists need to feel it's a safe country to enter. Again, region is already a bit tricky. You know, Caucasus, there is constant wars or conflicts between different countries and ethnic, you know, so it already does not help you, you know, and then the bad, like news always spreads much faster than the good news. So we had armed conflict with Russia, so of course that dropped, like, you know, our tourism numbers. So we literally went to all the potential, like, you know, crises that the country could go, and of course our pandemic as well, it affected the whole industry in, worldwide, but there has been few fundamentals that we have done, and it worked very well. First of all, easy access of the country. So we came up, and I always say I outsource the work without payment. So we have decided to eliminate the visa for more than 110 countries. So whose GDP was over 10,000 US dollars, why we need to create visas for them. So we cut down the visas for them. The second step was, look, if you have any OECD country visas or residence card, you can travel with that document. So that was one of the success stories why Middle East, when Fly Dubai started flying, it was twice per week, half empty. And after this reform, we had 6 flights per day, fully booked, and then soon after Dubai flights, there was flight from Sharjah, from Abu Dhabi, from Qatar, from Kuwait, from now Saudi Arabia. So with literally spending zero money and creating one policy decision that residents of UAE or Middle GCC countries can travel with their GCC residency card, it became suddenly a destination. So smart solutions really help to achieve your goals. We actually also did the Open Sky Agreement because we didn't have funds to create our own airline company, but of course the direct flights are the key essential. So we said, look, we're going to have an Open Sky Agreement which brings the, you know, it eliminates kind of the favoritism of the national airline company. So, and then we started high government officials to speak each airline companies and convince them to come and fly to Georgia, which of course brings the tourists as well. Of course, you have to start with immediate neighbors. That's your quick win. Who is going to come easily into the country? That's your neighboring countries, and that's, we concentrated with our neighboring countries, Turkey, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Russia, and that was the first comer. And then over the years, we increased the tires of the country. So then we went 3 hours of destination, 6 hours of destination, and always coming up like with smart solutions, like how we can bring them with, again, minimal budgets. Another thing I want to mention, okay, the government was aligned.
One last thing, because to be
yes, the government was aligned, but one thing I want to mention, you need hotel rooms, and the government is not able to invest. We are not UAE or any other rich countries that we can invest in the hotel industry. So we created few projects to incentivize the locals, and here also we made a smart solution. We allocated the budget, and rather than financing the hotels or putting our money into the project, we said that we co-finance the interest rate if the bank will give you the loan to invest into the hotel industry. So a lot of people who were in construction in other businesses started considering this business, and were able to take the loans, which leveraged the government spending, because we were only co-financing the interest rate only 2 years. And in addition to that, we said, if you are bringing the international brand hotels, we're going to finance their operational fee for 2 years, because usually the Georgians wanted to develop their way, the hotels, but it was not done properly, because we never had an experience of building the hotels and operating the hotels ourselves. While they brought the operators, the architectural was designed according to the standards. Operation was done according to the standards, and we counted that just paying the franchising fee for 2 years was much cheaper than supporting and making all these mistakes and then trying to improve and change these mistakes. So that was one of the reasons bringing the international operators in the regions of the country, because we didn't touch Tbilisi and 2 major cities, because we wanted to spread in the region, and that was like a new way of bringing the hotel industry alive and create additional 10,000 beds in the regions of Georgia, which again helped us to diversify our tourism products, to diversify also the countries who would come to the country, and to create the services. Again, there is much more to tell, but these are few ideas I wanted to share with you.
Thank you, Katie. Adrian, back to you. You gave us a very clear answer on your strategy, and you started talking a bit about the execution. Can you tell us a bit more about the execution experience? How did you measure success in execution, and what did that mean in terms of where you go next?
Look, I would distinguish between business metrics and the strategic plan or strategy metrics implementation. So in business metrics for success are simple. You have growth, you have profitability, you have leverage that the business can create, and you have impact. So these are basically how the success of a business is measured. And there are numbers. I mean, you say 25% of growth per year, and so. And look, and this kind of principles, they apply also for the country, so that's the good thing. I mean, that's a common similarity between managing a country and managing a company. I mean, obviously, different level of responsibility. Anyway, so that's the simple part. Instead, when you're measuring the success of a strategy implemented via execution, then there are a number of, I would say it's a little bit more difficult if you refer to the specific strategy, because you have to, first of all, to measure the objective, the achievement of the objectives the strategy has had. So how many of them at which level were achieved? And so that's a major thing, because if you don't achieve and you don't execute the strategic plan, I mean that kind of strategy remains just a wish. And so that's the first thing. The second would be efficiency. Efficiency means in implementing a specific strategy, you need to measure, to compare productivity versus cost. So you achieve something, but at which cost? So, and that's another criteria to estimate, to evaluate, let's say, a strategic plan, and to see if it was a good one or more or less good. So, and so this is also really important. The other criteria should be referred to quality. So quality of the implementation, let's say. So you implement, you execute a certain strategy. You have to check the stakeholders. So all the parties which are involved, impacted by that strategy. How happy are them? What's their, what were their expectations, and did you meet their expectations?
To your clients.
In a company, is the clients, but in a government, there are other stakeholders. Similarities exist. You know. So then in the quality as well, it's also included the, let's say, the mitigation. There are always some problems. So a matter of quality is how do you mitigate them, and what's the level of response, and this kind of things. You know. And then there is the accuracy, another criteria for estimating for evaluating other metrics. This accuracy means at which level have you met your objectives? What were the timelines? So were you inside? I mean, within the timeline. What was the financial impact? What was the the main scope of that strategy was exceeded or was met without anything remaining unmatched. And the last thing I would say is the change management. Since as I mentioned before, the strategy itself is something that changed. So a metric for measuring the success of executing the strategy is how do you manage the change. So should not be afraid of change. Change implies a risk, but it's a good thing. And you have to undertake it when it's necessary. But you have to manage. And that's another metrics for evaluating the execution.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Before we go to the final question from me and then moving to the audience, just so you know, you can submit your questions already now through the app. Zhivko, you mentioned people is key, and you mentioned that you inherited, you were, let's say, I guess, lucky to inherit a strong organization. But what did you do to further build the organization to be able to deliver on your ambitious strategy since you took over?
Definitely, as I said, everything starts with people. We have a, let's say, company and a portfolio which, as I said, is on one side competitive, but on the other side always need to be developed, to invest in it. And from the point of how to continue, the biggest challenge is how to bring these good people in the company and how to develop them to be even better. And from this perspective, we are investing a lot so that these people could receive new skills. They should be educated extra. Here I would like to thank Mike Zafirovsky for what he is doing with his program. We already have 4 managers who went through the Kellogg Zafirovsky program, and we are very thankful and very happy because these people are coming with new knowledge, I would say, even a view of the world and how the company should develop. We started a program of first we make a training center, then we went through the phase of a specialized program for us, which we are working with the universities, and we have about 100 people that every year are coming to company as practitioners, working with mentors, so that we could have these people in the team and to develop them. and of course many other programs which are trying to motivate our team how they should continue. But I think the base is definitely the knowledge, the base is definitely how they should be educated on one side, theoretical, on another how this should go in the system of the company. From the point of globalization, there is different when you are present in the markets where somebody knows you, but it's totally different when you go to new market. Then you really need to convince these people that you have this culture so that they can come to the company which is new there, and that they can find their perspective of how they should develop somewhere. So I think this combination, as I said, is the key, and it's very important to build this culture in which you could bring these people so that together you could make this extra value. Because, in this global world, things are very open, things are very transparent, the informations are very clear, and you really, you should be, how can I say, very, very ethical, I would say, very compliant, so that on a long run, people can count on the company that it can be, their perspective, and that this should be a mutual story of development together.
Thank you, Zhivko. And now looking at the questions, I'll ask a follow-up question that's coming from the audience on building the culture. What were the values of Alkaloid that were an anchor for the culture that you've built?
I think that every time it's bringing its own culture. It's a fact that our company exists for 87 years. It went through the kingdom of ex-Yugoslavia, through communism time, through independence of Republic of Macedonia, and it's normal that every time has its own culture. And it's a fact that this new time, we know that new generations which are coming have its own characteristics, and that on one side we should adapt to them, on the other side they should adapt to the system which we are offering as a company. And, it's a team effort, and everybody should a little bit be flexible so that together we could develop some success story. If there is a rigid position from our side, or from a side of a new employee, or from somebody who is, let's say, a little bit more experienced, then things will not move. This is a mutual effort, and together we need to, find the synergy how the story should be developed.
Yeah, thank you. Now the question with the most likes, I'll add mine to that one. To Katie, can you tell us about Georgia's success in fighting corruption and cronyism? What were maybe the one or two initiatives or policies that made a big difference in this regard?
I guess the anti-corruption activities was the key to success to any other sectors, because the corruption really kills everything. One or two, or I think so many, we needed to eradicate the corruption at the public sector, and that was the key for the newcomers, new government people who arrived. And we started reforming the police. And that was one of the most corrupted entities in the country. And I have to admit that we had to fire, it sounds very brutal, but we had to fire 20,000 policemen in one day. And for 1 month we did not have police. And to say the truth, the criminal rate went down. So one minute we thought that maybe we don't need police at all. But it was a 1 minute thought. But that actually was true, because when we were trying to do the gradually, the thing was when the newcomers came, the old people would make them corrupted, so they would feel the same, and it did not work. So that was kind of a radical, reforms that we took place, and also it was top-down as well. Because why the police was corrupted? Because previously the minister was corrupted, so they were asking the daily monthly money intake that at the end of the day the police officer had to gather to give to his boss, then this boss had to give. So it was a kind of a chain. So when the top was not asking and then you had the measurements at the bottom, that worked. So there is no other way. It can't be like top who corrupted and then ask the youngsters not to be corrupted. So it was, the whole approach. That's just one of the examples. The second example, we eliminated 80% of the license and permits which was used for the corruption rather than the main the reason. So we realized that those permits were just as an example. And then we reintroduced them gradually when we knew how to administrate. We got a lot of opposition why we changed there was no car inspection, and of course it's bad. But then the way it was just a simple paper that people would pay but it was not getting the real results. So we decided to get rid of all the permits and license where we see that it could not deliver the main goal, and then whenever we increased the capacity, we reintroduced back, and of course it had its own, impact and everything. We changed the university examination. That was a big one because previously universities administrate the income of the students by themselves, and it was one of the corrupted systems because the professors and the deans were taking money for each student. So there was no way that the student would get to the university merit-based. So we created the unified examination, and there was a huge opposition from the elite society because professors and deans were considered to be the elite of the society who were opposing because they were losing the source of their income. And suddenly these young people came who wants to change and why we should trust. Even parents were opposing because they knew how to play around and they were comfortable, whoever was comfortable, But after 2-3 years, when people really got to university on merit-based, then everybody looked promising. And everybody loved these reforms. So all these reforms were quite painful. As I mentioned, we had to downsize the government. There was 80% of Georgian society was involved in the public sector, and it was not needed. There was probably 21 different ministries or even more. And 2 more things which was key. We changed the tax system. So instead of 21 different taxes, we left 6 flat taxes. So it was much easier to administrate than to pay bribes. So what happened, the government revenues increased rather than decreased, even though our tax system decreased in terms of numbers and in terms of percentage as well. So that actually increased the revenues, and that was kind of the first our budget that we could do other projects. And then we put also in the constitution that no other government can be able to increase the taxes without public referendum, to make sure that we will cement those reforms, and if the new government will come, it will not change. So we introduced that if government will not give you the answer within certain days, the answer is silent, so to pressure the government officials to respond it quickly. So there has been a lot of layers of the reforms that we did in each sector and in each direction. And of course, the government was very strict. There was no exception. If there was a person which was kind of blamed into the corruption, even if it was a team player and part of the team, there was no exception because Georgia is a very small country. We all know each other. So if you do one exception, it would be a failure. So even though it was harsh, as I mentioned, there was no exception that made successfully to reform the anti-corruption in each level, and that was actually one of the reasons why then we were able to do many other reforms. That was kind of a fundamental for the country.
Thank you, Katie. Plenty of ideas. Hope there are still representatives from the government in the audience. A question for Adrian. You're running a technology company. In a technology company, the key asset is the skills that people bring. How did you manage to close the skill gap that you needed to execute on your long-term strategy?
Okay, this is definitely an important topic. And you have to have skills, and you have to build them. So our main issue was building the skills because, and was a kind of gradual process, because sometimes in the domains we were working in, there were not available skills, direct skills in the market. So that was something that we had to address and to support. So building those skills means not just trainings. Trainings is okay, and you gain, let's say, the professional skills. But you need also a kind of package of advantages, a package of support to the employees, to the ones who bring the value in the company.
What kind of support?
It can be various types of support. Either let's say focusing on them and making them a clear career path, so they know where they're supposed to be in 3 years, in 5 years, and so. So you have to generate hope and a clear understanding of their career. So what the company offers. And you have to also to make a correlation, to make clear to them a correlation between the growth of the company and their personal growth. So, and that helps. That helps to keep them active, to keep them motivated, and to keep them interested in the overall growth of the company, you know. But again, you know, nowadays, this is a big issue. So we're facing, as many other companies, a kind of trend of people to go to migrate in Western Europe and so. So, but and it's definitely not easy to mitigate it and to react. But let's say that I remain optimist that with the right strategy on motivating and on engaging the personnel into the company operations, not just doing the everyday job, but also doing a kind of involvement in strategic decisions that you take. So, and there's a beneficial, not only for them, because they feel involved and they feel good and they feel that they have a perspective in the company. But this is beneficial for the company as well, because there is a lot of resources that you have to explore in the pool of the overall company employees.
Thank you, Adrian. There is a question to Keti about how did Georgia go about growing its agriculture sector. Do you have any experience on this?
Yeah,
Would you
sure.
be able to say something about it?
Of course, I mentioned that Georgia has 22 microclimate zones. Again, we are a small country. It's not a big country, so definitely rather than concentrating on some crops where we can never compete, like Ukraine or Russia or Kazakhstan, where they have a larger, lands and cultivate wheat or corn. We have decided to concentrate on niche value-added products. Again, still agriculture, there was a big inefficiency because even though it's 8% of our GDP, and it's okay to be 8% of the GDP, indirectly or directly, there was 40% of population involved into agriculture. So there was a big room for development, and there is still big room to develop in agriculture. But we have created, again, this system under the program Produce in Georgia. And again, we have designed the project the way we can encourage the business to start investing into the agriculture sector, but not subsidizing heavily, rather than to create the stimulus project, so-called co-subsidizing the interest rate from the banks, but from 2 to 5 years, depending the type of agricultural products if you are doing. And our idea was also to concentrate on niche products. So suddenly now we see blueberries producing in Georgia. Hazelnut and nuts was one of the biggest product in Georgia. We see now olives growing in Georgia. We see other superfruits growing, and itself Georgia, it's a wine country, and I want to use this opportunity and mention that you have to all come to Georgia to visit our beautiful country and try the wines, which is the cradle of, scientifically approved that we are the cradle of wine. So we have not invented any big technological solutions, but definitely we have provided to the world the wine, and that's where the history starts. Anyway, so the idea is that we produce the high added value crops, and it also goes to the processing. Our export, if you see, it was very limited and not diversified, and mainly it was commodities. So we are changing where we can provide the high added value to our export products and create the projects that will stimulate to do the processing and creating more added value into Georgia. And that's the path we are taking. Again, there has been allocated a certain like huge kind of a sufficient budget from the government side. But as we know, agriculture takes time, and we are only now getting some benefits out of it. Again, exporting and diversifying the markets. We are concentrating on European market, as well as we are concentrating the Middle East market, where we can, provide the food security to them. And but again, very niche products, because we can't allocate big numbers and big quantities from Georgia.
Thank you, Katie. And for any Macedonian producers of agriculture, being in the Middle East, I can say it's a very attractive market. And I keep wanting to see Macedonian produce in the stores, in the supermarkets, and hope there will be more of them soon. Question to Zhivko, now the audience's favorite question. Biggest execution failure in your business career, and what did you learn from it?
Well, it's a fact that, I mean, of course, during the period there are different situations. We had attempts on some markets on which we were optimistic in the beginning that we could go through and make something which it will be, satisfactory enough. Unfortunately, it happened that on some of these markets, it's not so easy to be present there. But we were consistent. We were changing strategies on the market from one to other option. How should we do it? On some of the markets, we even changed complete teams. We changed the portfolios, and we succeeded from fourth, even from fifth time. And I think the most important point was that we tried not to work under the, I would say, some, how can I say, cultural prejudice, especially in this part of the world. When you don't succeed first time, you're almost dead. But we tried, as I said, second, third, we changed the teams in some markets, we changed the portfolio in some markets. And these days, some of these markets are probably one of the best cash makers in the company. So definitely, I think you need to be, consistent. And a very important point, I would tell you a story a few days ago. My son was telling me about some Afro-American lady who was going through different challenges in her business case, helping Apollo mission in that time. And on the end, she received this Medal of Freedom in the United States. And my son is telling to me, Father, this is, life is hard. I told him, sometimes life is hard, but giving up is not an option. And I think that was the case for these 5 attempts on some of the markets until we make the results which we wanted to have.
Thank you, Zhivko. So to paraphrase, it's easier said than done. Keep your conviction, find another path. Final concluding remarks, 2, maximum 3 sentences from each panelist. They told me to be very strict on time. Adrian, you moved from a successful corporate career to an entrepreneur. What would be your advice to somebody else who is sitting here in a corporate role but wants to be an entrepreneur?
don't get afraid. And get out of the comfort zone, and take risks. So I would encourage the entrepreneurship. So whoever feels that they can do it, they have to try. And this is important, so to start with. On the other hand, you need also to make an accurate estimation of the resources you can engage, of the alliances you can have, on the customers or other stakeholders you can address and cooperate with, and there are a number of things that you have to estimate carefully. A kind of SWOT analysis, that you have to build first. But again, try it.
100% of untried attempts are failure, right?
Yeah. If you don't try, the answer is always no.
Katie, you shared a lot of ideas from, or not ideas, but practices from Georgia that were relevant. Any one last final?
There are so many. It will not be enough timing, but I want to mention two things which I want to kind of summarize my speech here. One is the cancer can happen in a healthy body. So constant monitoring of corruption is the key that you have to constantly find and never get relaxed that, oh, I've done my work. Right now, Georgia has a second phase of the reform agenda. We are having a lot of big challenges. It's not easy, and I hope that we will go through, and soon you will see Georgia as a European candidate country, reforming the rule of law and the court of the system, and so many other things that we need to deliver, and this is key. And second, I want to mention, when I was 20 years old, if you told me that my country will transform that much, I would say no, there is no way. I thought that corruption, mafia was in our DNA. But I realized that was kind of a Soviet inheritance, and if there is a will and like-minded people together, everything can be achieved in a very short period of time, like 3 to 5 years. You can deliver, it's going to be harsh, it's going to have a lot of opposition from your teams inside, internally, everyone, but then within 3 to 5 years, you're going to see the result that gives you a lot of energy to capitalize on that and do more work. So my encouragement will be that if there is a will, everything can be possible in a very short period of time.
Zhivko, you shared your big lesson learned. Any other final advice for business leaders in the audience who have similar aspiration to grow their business 4 times, 5 times, 10-fold from where they are today?
I think that we should broaden our views. I think that you should try. It doesn't hurt. And definitely, especially I would say for the business community here, at least try in the region and then try to be global. Let's go even step by step, but just try. Don't stay only here in Macedonia. We are a small market, and unfortunately, we can't satisfy ourselves only with this part. That would be.
Thank you, Zhivko. Thank you to the three of you. I should have said this at the beginning, but now said it at the end. The objective of this session was to leave in each of you either an idea that you can take in your context or an inspiration like Adrian gave to do something different. And I'm hoping that it was achieved. I'll hear it based on the applause. Thank you.